idea behind Glass Cymru, which is a not-for-profit company which now owns Welsh Water, it goes back quite a long way really. When the industry was first privatised, it suffered what I might describe as a lack of legitimacy. People do not like a public service, a monopoly to boot, being run for profit. Particularly in Wales, I think, we wanted to find a way whereby customers had a much bigger stake in their industry, their water industry in particular. So when the owners of Welsh Water, back in 2001, nearly 10 years ago, got into real difficulties, myself and a colleague who by then left the company formed a new company called Glass Cymru, which is a not-for-profit or a company limited by guarantee. And after maybe 3 or 4 goes, we finally managed to raise the £1.9 billion we needed to actually buy Welsh Water and put it into this unique not-for-profit ownership structure. I think it has, by and large. The water industry is very measurable. Most things that matter to customers, be it water quality, be it customer service, be it protecting the environment, all those things can be measured on a consistent basis that allows companies and other stakeholders to compare Welsh Water's performance against Thames Water or Severn Trent or any other water companies. And on those measures, Welsh Water's done pretty well. For 2 years in 2004 and 2005, we were the top performing company in the industry. We're currently middle of the pack in those measures. Over the same time frame, we have reduced our costs by more than any other water company. And our bills, back in 2001, a major issue for Welsh Water customers because they were so high, our bills are now down to the industry average because of the efficiencies that this model has delivered for people in Wales. We as an organisation are judged by a host of measures: water quality, environmental performance, customer service, and so on. And those measurements are applied equally to all 10 water and sewage companies in England and Wales. And any organisation must thrive by performance against those measures. What reinforces all of that, as far as we're concerned, what disciplines people like myself, my colleagues, is that we have an independent board of directors. We also have members. We also have regulators. And it's worth bearing in mind that all the money we raise to both purchase Welsh Water, but also to finance this very large capital investment programme that continues and will continue for many years to come, that is all money at risk. So our investors also hold the company to account. And if we were a poor performing company, the disciplines are in place to remove management that's not doing its job well enough, but equally the arrangements are in place to reward good management as well. It's absolutely critical. We have members, people who are drawn from customer groups right across Wales, all of whom have an interest in ensuring that Welsh Water is a top performing company. We have independent directors, all of whom are senior people with big reputations. They would not put their reputations behind a company that is not doing its job properly. They have enormous experience from engineering to public health to finance, all the things that matter for our industry. And then of course we've got regulation. The water industry, because it provides such an important public service, we are regulated by Ofwat on economic matters, we're regulated by the Drinking Water Inspectorate for water quality, and we're regulated by the Environment Agency for environmental matters. So all these disciplines come together to ensure that Welsh Water will strive to be one of the best performing companies. That's not all of it though. I think there's a real passion in this company. People actually want to be part of Welsh Water. People buy into and believe in the idea that looking after this industry, which will be here for many generations after we're gone, doing that really well and providing this essential public service that people rely on 24/7, it's a big job. It's a big vocation, frankly. I think it has a fair bit to do with it, actually. It doesn't necessarily apply to everyone who works for Welsh Water, but for many people who do work for Welsh Water, many of whom have been with the company for 20, 30, in some cases 40 years, this idea that we are looking after this industry on behalf of the people who rely on this service, rely on this public service, clean drinking water 24/7, looking after wastewater, making sure it's treated properly before it's released back into the rivers or the coastal waters around the coast of Wales. That really appeals to a lot of people for whom the water industry is a vocation. And you only have to look back to the troubles we had during the very cold weather this Christmas, the very freezing weather, record freeze followed by a record thaw, we had people coming in from all across Wales to work for Welsh Water to ensure that the services were not interrupted as we saw in other parts of the industry elsewhere. And that response from the guys, we were never short of people, I think speaks volumes for the sort of organisation we have here in Wales. It's of critical importance to our industry and certainly our performance as well. The fact that most things that matter to customers or to any other interested party as far as our industry is concerned is measurable and can be compared. So we know what good looks like, we know what middling looks like, we know what bad looks like. That really matters, and if you went to anybody in this company today, they would all be able to tell you what our performance is on some of these key metrics, be it water quality, environmental performance, or customer service. I should also add that these metrics come with sanctions. If we fall short on some of the water quality measures, for example, then the company can be prosecuted. Indeed, as a director of the company, I can be personally prosecuted for failure to deliver certain performance necessities. So the fact that we can measure quality is of essential importance to ensuring standards are achieved and also to drive performance. It's worth bearing in mind why we did this in the first place. When we first bought Welsh Water as Glascymru, we had to raise £1.9 billion. That was a very high level of debt to assets, a bit like buying a house with a very 100% mortgage. And to de-risk the business, we brought in companies who took on the operational risk around delivery. 10 years on, we have built up an enormous financial reserve in Welsh Water. So we're currently about 69% funded by bonds, about 30% funded by reserves or customer equity. And therefore the decision whether or not to outsource was one we could do on operational grounds, not on financing grounds. And I think the question is absolutely pertinent, because we felt that 10 years on, we were not getting the sort of control and performance out of the commercial contracts that we had perhaps when the contracts were first let. So it was a very easy decision for us to make to bring the operational control back under our direct control ourselves. And I must tell you that the guys who were transferred from previous contract environment back into the direct ownership and control of Welsh Water were absolutely delighted to see that happen. And we've seen an enormous spur in performance since the contracts were ended. So I think the outsourcing experience, it delivered many benefits, but equally it came with a number of drawbacks. We've learned a lot of lessons, and we're making sure those lessons are learned going forward. I should add, though, that we were 85% outsourced 10 years ago, or over the last 10 years. We're still about 60% outsourced, because all the capital investment we do is carried out by under contract. Likewise, our IT services and also our customer billing and other activities of that sort continue to be delivered through commercial contracts, and that does help keep the business on its toes. But we have decided that anything to do with the fundamental delivery of clean drinking water and looking after this £25 billion of assets we have in Welsh Water, that must be under the direct control of myself and my colleagues in Welsh Water. Well, we have some very big targets for the business. We have the best record on cost efficiency in the whole industry, by some distance, I should add. But despite that, we've also set a target to reduce our cost by a further 20% by 2015. And that's going to be around things like energy efficiency, but also streamlining the business. There's no question that outsourced contracts comes with overhead, and we have got rid of that overhead over the last 12 months. So bringing the guys under direct control of Welsh Water has been a very positive move for everyone, but we are under no illusions that it's going to be a very challenging time, both to improve performance across the piece, but also to improve our cost efficiency. But we have a culture within Welsh Water which I have to say is very collaborative, very supportive. We have something called the Working Together Agreement, which we've stood by for 15 years or more, and that is unbelievably powerful in terms of everyone driving the business forward, recognising where we can do things better, and just pulling out better and more efficiencies. The fact the industry is very measurable, and we can compare our performance on costs or in terms of customer service with 9 other water and sewage companies, is a very important spur, because it tells us what good looks like, and it it tells both my customers but also my employees and my staff how we are performing against some of the other companies, and that is, we're all very competitive. We want to be the best, and that works for us, I must tell you. Well, we have the Welsh Assembly government. Water is a devolved matter in Wales, and we have a very good relationship with the Assembly government. The policy framework under which we operate is set by government, and that is set by the Welsh Assembly government. But whereas they set the policy environment, and we have regular contact with our elected representatives, both within Wales but also those MPs that go back to Westminster, they're not directly involved in the business in any way whatsoever. This is a standalone, independent company. It enjoys a lot of support from politicians in Wales, but they are not involved in directing it or in running the company. That is a matter for the board of the company. The board is made up of independent directors and executive directors like myself. Politicians are not involved in the running of this company, but they do provide the policy framework under which we operate, which is very important. That's a really good question. Not much. I think the governance arrangements have worked better than we expected. The financing that we put in place, and that is where we achieve nearly all of our efficiency. Investors are buying bonds in Welsh Water at rates of interest which are way, way below what any other company can raise money at. The one area where I think I would have made changes sooner is around the outsourcing. I think that asking guys who are very committed to Welsh Water to be employed by a third party for 10 years was probably too long. And whereas the outsourcing was necessary on day one, it wasn't necessary after 5 years, and I'm actually delighted that after 10 years we were able to make the decision to bring the operation back together again. So that's probably my biggest regret. If I was going to do it again, I'd do that a bit differently, I think. Gosh, well, it's far bit from me to advise the NHS. It's got some very, very big challenges indeed. I think one thing does strike me though is that like the NHS, the water industry is filled with people who are very passionate about their industry and have a real desire to do the best they can for their customers. We are also in the business of public health. Clean drinking water, effective sanitation. It doesn't get much more important than that. And around that, I think you can tap into that passion, into that vocational instinct of the people who work in the industry. And if you reinforce that with really good governance, people at the top who support the guys who are doing difficult jobs on the front line, so to speak, real transparency, real purpose into what we're trying to achieve, I can see parallels. And certainly the independence we have as Welsh Water, outside of government, but with a very clear remit as to what must be achieved and a real basis on which to judge whether we're doing it well or not so well, that's very important, and it makes the organisation very healthy, very driven, and very purposeful, and ultimately it makes it to be a great place to work.